I'm 70 years old now, but I remember it like it was yesterday. That day, when my daughter-in-law, Sandy, marched into my office and told me to get the hell out of my own company, was a moment that changed everything. It wasn't just the words she used, it was the look in her eyes, the anger that radiated off of her. Something about it hit me deep, deeper than I'd ever felt before. It was a slap to the face, figuratively and literally, in a way. Let me start from the beginning. I've spent my life building this company, from the ground up, with nothing but a dream, a few dollars, and a lot of hard work. I'd started it in the late 70s, when things were tough. People didn't believe in what I was doing at first, but I did. I had a vision. I was going to turn my small idea into something big. And after all those years, after fighting, struggling, making sacrifices, I had done it. My company, Pierce Manufacturing, was a household name. Well, maybe not a household name, but we were a big player in the industry, and we were respected. At least, that's what I thought. I'd always told my son, Jacob, that he was going to take over one day. I didn't care what anyone said about nepotism or all that. Jacob was a good kid. Smart. Determined. He had the skills, the drive, and the heart to lead the company, I thought. So, when he married Sandy a few years ago, I thought things would just continue as normal. Sandy wasn't exactly what I'd pictured for him, but what could I do? He loved her, and that's what mattered, right? From the start, I could tell Sandy wasn't happy with the idea of Jacob taking over Pierce Manufacturing. She'd always say things like, "Jacob's too good for this kind of business," or, "Why work so hard when we could just invest in something easier?" She didn't seem to understand the sacrifices I'd made or the value of hard work. It wasn't about just making money, it was about building something that lasted, something you could be proud of. But I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to cause any tension. Jacob was happy, and I didn't want to be the one to make him choose between his wife and his father. But things changed. A couple of months ago, Jacob and I had a meeting about the future of the company. He'd been working alongside me for a few years, and we were starting to talk about who would take over when the time came. I was getting older, and I knew I wouldn't be around forever. I wanted to be sure the company would be in good hands when I was gone, so I started making plans. I thought Jacob and I were on the same page, but Sandy? She wasn't on the same page. Not at all. She hated the idea of Jacob taking over. I could tell by the way she talked to him, the way she whispered in his ear when I wasn't around, telling him that he didn't need to follow in my footsteps. She wanted him to focus on something else, anything else. It wasn't just that she didn't want him to take over the company, it was that she didn't want him to work at all. She wanted a life of ease, of comfort, and as long as Jacob worked at Pierce Manufacturing, that wasn't going to happen. It made me feel like everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was just a burden to her. But I didn't confront her about it. No, I let Jacob figure things out. I thought if I gave him the space, he'd make the right decision. He wasn't a fool, after all. He'd see what was best for him, and he'd make his choice. What I didn't expect was the day Sandy decided to walk into my office. It was a Tuesday morning, like any other. The sun was just starting to rise, and I was sitting in my office going over some reports when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clicking on the floor. It was too early for anyone else to be here, and I wasn't expecting any visitors. I looked up and saw Sandy standing in the doorway, a look of anger on her face that I had never seen before. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. I didn't know what had gotten into her, but I was hoping it wasn't something serious. Without a word, she stormed into my office, slamming the door behind her. I was taken aback. I hadn't seen her this worked up in years. She was usually so calm, so collected, but today? Today, there was fire in her eyes. And it wasn't the kind of fire that you could ignore. "You need to step down," she said, her voice cold, cutting through the air like a knife. "This company isn't yours anymore. It's Jacob's. And you need to get out of the way. I blinked, not sure if I had heard her correctly. Excuse me? You heard me, she spat. This company has been your life, but it's time for you to move on. Jacob's the one who's going to run it now, not you. So pack up your things and leave. I stood up, shocked. My mouth went dry. Sandy, what the hell are you talking about? Jacob and I are still discussing this. There's no reason to. No, you're not discussing it. You're holding him back. You're trying to control everything. But Jacob's done with that. He's done with you. He doesn't need your company. He doesn't need you. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My own daughter-in-law, someone I had welcomed into my family, someone I had tried to be kind to, was standing there, telling me that everything I'd worked for meant nothing. That I meant nothing. It wasn't just the words. It was the delivery. The venom in her tone, the way she looked at me like I was nothing more than an old man who had overstayed his welcome. I had never felt so small in my entire life. I tried to steady my breath, to find the right words, but they wouldn't come. Sandy, this is my company. It's been my life's work. I'm not just going to walk away because you tell me to. She laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was mocking, cruel. You're too old to keep running this place. You're stuck in the past, and Jacob knows it. He's just too nice to tell you the truth. But I'm not. You need to get out. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't form. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to process what she was saying. And then, when she saw that I wasn't responding, she turned and headed for the door. Don't make me do this again, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Just leave. It'll be easier for everyone. And with that, she left, leaving me standing in the middle of my own office, stunned and shaking. It was like the world had flipped upside down. The woman I had once considered part of my family had just treated me like a complete stranger. Worse than that, she had just made it clear that everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was worth nothing to her. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that I wasn't going to give up without a fight. This was my company. And I wasn't going anywhere. But what I didn't know then was how far Sandy was willing to go to get what she wanted. How far she would push Jacob to make sure that I was out of the picture for good. And how much I was about to lose. Jacob wasn't in the office when Sandy stormed out. But I knew he would be back soon. He always stopped by in the late afternoon after a long day in the field, checking in on things, going over reports. It was a habit of his, a kind of ritual. But today, I wasn't sure I was ready for the conversation that was going to follow. I had to confront him about what had just happened, about what his wife had said, and about how much it had cut me to the bone. I sat there, behind my desk, long after Sandy had gone. The minutes dragged on, the clock ticking louder in the silence of the room. It wasn't that I didn't have the words, I had plenty. It was that I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what Jacob had to say. For the first time, I was questioning everything about my son's loyalty, his integrity. Did he even care about me anymore? Or was he so blinded by his wife's ambition that he was willing to let go of everything I had built? When Jacob finally walked in, he was still wearing his work boots, his shirt untucked, the collar slightly askew from a long day. But there was something in his face that made me pause. It wasn't the usual warmth I was used to seeing in him. It was more strained. He seemed almost reluctant to meet my gaze. "Dad," he said, closing the door behind him. "I heard about the meeting with Sandy." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at him. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't help myself. The anger from earlier was still fresh, and the hurt was even sharper. "You heard about it?" I repeated, leaning back in my chair. "What exactly did you hear, Jacob?" He hesitated, shifting on his feet like he wasn't sure how to begin. His eyes flickered to the side, avoiding mine. "Look, I know this is hard to hear, but you've got to understand. Sandy's been really stressed about all of this. I've been hearing a lot of her concerns, and I think she's got a point. You're not getting any younger, and the company, it's time to think about the future." I felt a cold, sharp pang in my chest. You think it's time to think about the future? I repeated. You think I haven't been thinking about the future for the past 30 years? This company is my legacy, Jacob. And now you're telling me that it's time for me to step aside? For who, Sandy? He shifted uncomfortably. It's not just Sandy, Dad. It's me too. I've been thinking about it for a while now. We've been discussing it for months, and it's not an easy decision, but what, Jacob? I cut him off. You're really going to sit there and tell me that you've been discussing this behind my back with her? After all I've done for you? After all I've done for this company? He flinched, his expression faltering for a brief moment. It's not like that. I'm not trying to hurt you, Dad. It's just that. Just that what? I snapped. You've been talking behind my back about taking over the company, and now, suddenly, you think I should just hand it over to you? You and Sandy? Jacob's eyes flickered, and for a moment, I could see the conflict in his face. But it was quickly replaced by something else, something I didn't want to see. A kind of determination, a kind of resolve. Look, Dad, I didn't want it to come to this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But Sandy's right. It's time to move on. The company is yours, but you've built it into something that can't be handed over to someone who's stuck in the past. That was it. That was the breaking point. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I'd been so sure that my son would understand, that he would see the value in what I'd done, in what I'd sacrificed. But now? Now, it felt like he was just as eager to tear it all down. You're not listening to me, Jacob, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. This isn't about the company. It's about respect. It's about loyalty. You've been listening to her for months, and now, you're telling me that my work, my life's work, means nothing? He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, slowly, almost as if he were trying to ease the tension between us. But it wasn't working. I couldn't stand the way he was looking at me, like he was trying to justify everything that Sandy had said. Dad, I don't want to hurt you. You have to understand, this isn't easy for me. But this isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about my family, too. I have a life with Sandy. We have our future to think about. Anne. I stood up abruptly, cutting him off. I couldn't sit there any longer, listening to this. No, Jacob. It's about me too. It's about the years I've put into building this. And now you want to just throw it all away? For what? To make her happy? Jacob's jaw tightened. I'm not throwing anything away, Dad. I'm just trying to move forward. I shook my head. You're not moving forward, Jacob. You're abandoning everything we've worked for. You're letting Sandy turn you against me, against your own father. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Neither of us knew what to say. I was too angry, too hurt, to find the words, and Jacob, he wasn't ready to admit what was happening. Not yet. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I spoke again, my voice low but firm. I want you to leave, Jacob. I can't do this anymore. His eyes widened in shock. What? Dad, you don't mean that. I mean it, I said. You need to make a choice. If you want to walk away from everything I've built, then do it. But I won't stand here and let you tear this company apart. I won't stand here and let you do this to me. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was weighing everything I had just said. But in the end, he just nodded, a single, defeated motion. I'll leave, he said quietly. But I hope you know that this isn't easy for me. I watched as he turned and left, the door closing softly behind him. It was over. The moment I had feared was finally here. I had lost my son. Not just his respect, but his trust. And there was no coming back from this. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent my time in my office, trying to make sense of what had happened. I had never imagined that my son would choose his wife over me, that he would abandon the company like this. I had spent decades building this place, pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into it. And now, just like that, it was slipping through my fingers. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to try and fix things, to reach out to Jacob and make him see reason. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he left. It was as though something had changed in him, something that I couldn't understand. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was someone else, someone who valued comfort over legacy, who would rather appease his wife than honor the family name. I tried not to think about it. I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. But every time I walked through the halls of Pierce Manufacturing, I felt a weight on my chest, a sense of loss I couldn't shake. This place, the company, it was supposed to be my legacy. It was supposed to stand for something. And now it felt like it was crumbling around me. But then, a few days after Jacob's visit, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my lawyer, Charles. He'd been handling all the legal matters for Pierce Manufacturing for years, and I trusted him implicitly. When I picked up the phone, I could tell something was off. "Mr. Pierce, I think it's time we talk about the trust," Charles said, his voice low and serious. "The trust?" I echoed. I hadn't thought about the trust in years. It was a document I'd set up when I first started the company, to ensure that my legacy would be protected and passed down to my children when the time came. I had always assumed Jacob would take over, that everything would go smoothly. But now, with everything falling apart, I wasn't so sure. "Yes," Charles said. "I think it's time you come down to my office. There's something in the trust one think you need to see." I agreed to meet him the next morning. It was hard to summon the energy to go anywhere, but I knew this could be important. If there was something in the trust that could help me, something that could stop Sandy and Jacob from taking control of everything, I needed to know about it. The next day, I drove to Charles's office, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What had he found? Was there some clause in the trust that could change everything? Or was it just another dead end? When I arrived, Charles greeted me with a somber expression. He led me into his office, a small but comfortable room with dark wood furniture and shelves full of legal books. It had always been a place that gave me a sense of security, a place where I could trust the man who had helped me build and protect my company for years. But today, the room felt cold. "I've been going over the trust documents," Charles began, "and there's something in there that I think you should see." He handed me a thick folder, its edges worn from years of handling. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling slightly as I flipped through the pages. There were the usual legal clauses, all the familiar language about the company being passed down to my heirs, the conditions under which things would be transferred, the percentages, the shares. Everything seemed normal, until I reached the last page. There, at the bottom of the page, was a clause I had never seen before. It was short, simple, and buried in the fine print, a detail I had missed when I first set up the trust. But now, with everything that had happened, it hit me like a ton of bricks. If, at the time of my passing, my son Jacob Pierce is married and in possession of full legal authority over Pierce Manufacturing, the control of the company shall revert to my daughter, Emma Pierce, until such a time as she decides to step aside or relinquish her position. I stared at the words, unable to believe what I was reading. It didn't make sense. Why would my father have put that clause in the trust? Why would he have made provisions for me to take control if Jacob was married? "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaky. "Why would my father have done this? Why would he have left me this opportunity?" Charles looked at me carefully. "I can't say for sure, Mr. Pierce. But what I can tell you is that this changes everything. The trust was set up to protect your family, your legacy. And it seems your father had a plan, even if you didn't realize it." I was in shock. I couldn't process what I had just learned. My father, in his infinite wisdom, had known something I didn't. He had seen something in Jacob, something that wasn't right, and he had made sure that I had a way to take back control if things went south. But why didn't Jacob know about this? Why hadn't he ever mentioned it? Was it possible that Sandy didn't know either? I sat back in my chair, trying to make sense of it all. This was the key, the leverage I needed. I didn't have to let Sandy and Jacob take the company away from me. My father had left me a way to fight back, a way to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But it wasn't going to be easy. I could already hear Sandy's voice in my head, that sharp, dismissive tone she always used. I could see her standing there, telling me to get out, to leave it all behind. She thought she had won. She thought that by manipulating Jacob, by pushing me out, she could get everything she wanted. But she was wrong. "Charles," I said, my voice steadying, "what do I need to do to make this official? How do I take control of the company?" Charles looked at me with a knowing expression. "Well, Mr. Pierce, it's not going to be a walk in the park. You'll have to go to court, contest the control of the company. But if the trust is valid, and if the terms are clear, there's a good chance the court will uphold your right to take control." I felt a surge of hope. This wasn't over. It wasn't over by a long shot. Sandy and Jacob thought they had won, but they were about to find out that they hadn't even begun to fight. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, determination setting in. "I'm not going down without a fight." Charles nodded. "Then we'll get started right away. It's time to take back what's yours." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and preparation for the battle I knew was coming. But beneath the surface of all the hustle and bustle, I could feel the weight of it all. The fight for Pierce Manufacturing wasn't just about money, it was about something much deeper. It was about everything I had spent my life building, about the legacy I was determined to protect. But more than that, it was about my family. About Jacob. And about Sandy. I had never expected a battle like this, especially not with my own son. I had always imagined that when the time came, we would sit down together and discuss the future of the company. I thought we'd make a smooth transition, with me passing the torch to him and him taking the company to new heights. I never thought I'd be fighting him, fighting for something that should have been ours by birthright. Charles was helping me with everything, gathering evidence, preparing arguments, and setting up meetings with experts who could help support my case. The clause in the trust was clear enough, but we needed to be sure everything was airtight. If there was any ambiguity, Sandy and Jacob would use it against me. I spent days reviewing every document, every email, and every conversation I'd ever had with Jacob. I had to dig deep, to understand exactly how I had gotten here, how things had gone so wrong. I thought I knew everything about my son. I thought I understood his values, his ambitions. But now, looking back, I saw things differently. I saw how Sandy had slowly poisoned him, how she had chipped away at his loyalty to me, to our family, until there was nothing left. And that hurt more than anything else. One afternoon, Charles called me into his office for an urgent meeting. I could tell by the look on his face that something had changed. Something big. "We need to talk," he said, ushering me into his office. "There's something I've uncovered, something I didn't expect." I sat down, my heart racing. "What is it?" Charles handed me a folder, and my eyes immediately went to the name on the top, Sandy Pierce. I frowned, wondering what this had to do with her. I had been so focused on the trust, on the company, that I hadn't given much thought to Sandy's role in all of this. But now, as I opened the folder, I felt my stomach twist. It was a series of bank statements, property records, and emails between Sandy and several high-profile businessmen. The documents painted a picture I wasn't ready to see. "Sandy's been using Jacob's name to secure deals behind your back," Charles said quietly, his voice grim. "She's been working with investors to sell off parts of Pierce Manufacturing. She's been slowly trying to dismantle it." My mind was reeling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sandy had been betraying me from the very beginning, using my son's name to secure her own wealth and power. I had always known she was ambitious, but I never imagined she would go this far. She wasn't just trying to push me out of the company, she was actively trying to destroy it. Charles slid another document across the desk, this one a contract that was clearly signed by Jacob. It was an agreement to sell a portion of the company's assets to a private investor. But there was something off about it, something that didn't add up. "Take a look at the signature," Charles said. "This isn't Jacob's handwriting." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. It wasn't Jacob's signature. The handwriting was unfamiliar, slanted in a way that made it seem rushed, hurried. My mind immediately went to Sandy. She had forged Jacob's signature. She had manipulated him, used him as a pawn in her game. This is fraud," I said, my voice shaking. "She forged his signature to sell off parts of the company." Charles nodded. "Exactly. And it's not just this one. There are several others. It's all leading to one conclusion, Mr. Pierce. Sandy's been working behind the scenes to take control of the company for herself. And Jacob, well, I'm afraid he's been a willing participant." I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I had trusted her. I had welcomed her into my family, into my life. And this is what she had done, betrayed me, betrayed us, all for her own selfish gain. I thought back to the meetings, the conversations I'd had with Jacob over the years. He had always been the loving son, the loyal one. But now, it seemed like I had been blind to everything happening right under my nose. "I need to talk to Jacob," I said, standing up. "I need to confront him. This isn't just about Sandy anymore. It's about him too." Charles gave me a concerned look. "Mr. Pierce, I strongly advise you to be careful. If Jacob is involved in this, it won't be an easy conversation. He may not be willing to listen, especially now that he's been manipulated by Sandy. But you need to have the facts. And you need to have them on your side." I nodded, steeling myself. I had no choice but to confront my son. He needed to know what his wife had done, and he needed to know the truth. I arranged to meet Jacob at the office that evening, after work hours. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't let this go on any longer. When he walked into the office, he looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look like the confident, strong son I had known. He looked defeated. "Dad," he said, his voice low. "What is it?" I stood up and gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, Jacob. We need to talk." He hesitated for a moment, then sat down. I could see the tension in his face, the weight of everything that had happened between us. But I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to yell at him. I was here to show him the truth. "I've seen the documents, Jacob," I said quietly. "I know what's been going on. I know what Sandy has been doing behind my back." His eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "I'm talking about the forged signatures, the deals she's made with investors, the way she's been trying to sell off parts of the company," I said, holding up the papers. "She's been working behind your back, Jacob. And I think she's been manipulating you the whole time." Jacob stared at the papers in disbelief. His face paled as he skimmed the documents. When he looked back up at me, his expression was a mix of confusion and guilt. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear, I didn't know. Sandy. I thought she was helping. I thought she was just trying to make things easier for us. But I didn't realize. I didn't know she was doing this." I sat down across from him, my heart heavy. "She's been using you, Jacob. She's been using your name, your trust, to tear this family apart. She's not interested in the company. She's interested in power. And she's willing to do anything to get it." He looked down, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't know, Dad. I didn't see it. I was so blinded by everything else that I didn't realize what was happening right under my nose. I'm sorry." I leaned forward, putting my hand on his. "I know you didn't mean for any of this to happen. But now, you have to make a choice. You have to choose who you're going to stand with. Are you going to stand with me, with your family? Or are you going to let Sandy destroy everything? For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, his face a mixture of regret and confusion. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to do, Dad. I've made so many mistakes. But I'll make this right. I'll fix this. Jacob left my office that night with a heavy heart, the weight of everything crashing down on him. I watched him go, wondering if this would be the turning point, the moment when he realized the depth of the mess he had been dragged into. But as much as I wanted to believe in his remorse, a part of me couldn't shake the fear that he was still under Sandy's spell. She had been manipulating him for so long, twisting his perceptions, feeding him lies about what was best for our family, for the company. The next day, Jacob came to see me again, looking even more exhausted than before. But this time, there was something different in his eyes, something that wasn't there the night before. There was a fire in them, a resolve. I spoke to Sandy, he said, his voice tight. I raised an eyebrow. And? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. She denied everything. She told me I was imagining things, that I had it all wrong. But I could see it in her eyes, Dad. I could tell she knew exactly what I was talking about. She didn't even try to deny the documents. She just changed the subject. Started talking about how I was making a big mistake by even considering a legal battle. How I was betraying her, that it would ruin everything. So she's still lying to you, I said, not surprised. Jacob nodded, looking pained. Yeah. But it's not just that. She told me I was being weak. That if I let you take control of the company, it would mean that I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. She said that if I didn't do this for us, for our future, I'd be nothing but your puppet. And I'm so tired of hearing her say that, but I don't know, Dad. A part of me is still. I don't know what to think. I could see the turmoil in his face, the internal battle between loyalty to his wife and his loyalty to his family, to the company that had been built by generations of Pierce men. I didn't want to push him too hard, but I also couldn't let him keep making excuses. Jacob, you need to see what's happening here, I said gently, but firmly. Sandy doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about the company. All she cares about is what she can take from it. She's been using you to get what she wants. And if you keep letting her control you like this, you'll lose everything, your family, your legacy, your integrity. He flinched, as if my words had struck too close to the truth. I don't want to lose my family, Dad. I don't want to lose you. But you can't let her tear this family apart, I interrupted, standing up. I'm not asking you to choose me over her. I'm asking you to choose what's right. I'm asking you to stand up for what we've worked for. What you've worked for. Don't let her take that from you. He looked down at the floor, his jaw clenched tightly. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, slowly, he looked up at me. I'm going to confront her again, he said, his voice quiet but determined. This time, I'm going to tell her everything. I'm going to show her the documents. I'm going to make her see the truth. I nodded, my heart swelling with hope. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about my son finding his strength again, about him breaking free of the control Sandy had over him. Good, I said. But Jacob, you need to be prepared. She's not going to take this well. She's going to try and manipulate you, to make you feel guilty. But you have to stay strong. You have to stand firm. I will, Dad, he said, his voice steady. I won't let her control me anymore. I'm going to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't hear from Jacob the rest of that day, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me was anxious, wondering how the conversation had gone, but another part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to hear about Sandy's lies, her manipulation. I knew it was going to be bad, but I had no idea how bad it would get. Late that night, just as I was about to head to bed, I got a call from Jacob. I could hear the tension in his voice even before he spoke. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What happened?" "I confronted her," he said, his voice shaky. "And she didn't take it well. She threw everything in my face. She told me I was betraying her. That I was tearing our family apart. She said that if I went through with this, if I let you take control, she would leave me. She threatened to take everything, our house, our savings. She said she'd ruin me if I went against her." I closed my eyes, trying to process his words. I had known Sandy was manipulative, but this was something else. This was a woman who was willing to tear her own marriage apart just to get what she wanted. "And what did you say?" I asked, my voice low. "I told her I was done," Jacob said, his voice barely a whisper. "I told her I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. But I don't know, Dad. She said something that hit me hard. She said that I wasn't a real man if I let you take control of the company. She said I'd never be my own person if I followed you." I took a deep breath, my chest heavy. "Jacob, you need to understand something. You are your own person. This company is part of your legacy, but it's not who you are. Sandy is trying to make you believe that this is the only thing that matters, but she's wrong. You are so much more than this business. You are so much more than her." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "But it's hard. She's always made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like I was just a second choice. Like I needed her to make me whole." "You don't need her to make you whole," I said firmly. "You just need to find your strength, Jacob. You're stronger than you think." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Jacob breathing, like he was trying to work through everything I had just said. "I'm going to take care of it, Dad," he said finally, his voice steady again. "I'll fix this. I'm not going to let her control me anymore. I'll make sure we get everything back on track. For both of us." I smiled, relieved. "I'm proud of you, Jacob. This is your decision now. You've got this." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. Jacob was finally starting to see through Sandy's lies. He was finally waking up. And that, in itself, was a victory. The next few days felt like a whirlwind, each moment a mix of anticipation and dread. Jacob had told me he was going to handle things with Sandy, but I wasn't naive enough to think that it was going to be easy. Sandy wasn't the kind of woman who took rejection or losing control lightly. I knew she'd fight back, but I had no idea just how far she'd go. Jacob and I spoke several times over the next couple of days. Each conversation left me more and more convinced that he was finally seeing the truth. The guilt that had weighed on him for so long, guilt that had been carefully cultivated by Sandy, was starting to lift. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't about loyalty to her, but loyalty to his family, to the legacy that had been built over decades. The company wasn't just mine, it was his too. It was his inheritance, his birthright. And no one, not even Sandy, could take that away from him. But as much as I wanted to believe that Jacob was done with her manipulation, I still feared what Sandy might do. I knew she wouldn't give up without a fight. And sure enough, just when I thought things might finally calm down, I received a call that made my blood run cold. It was late in the evening when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw Jacob's name. I picked up, already sensing the tension in the air. "Dad, I need to talk to you," Jacob said, his voice strained, as if he'd been holding something in for a while. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. I could tell something was wrong. "It's Sandy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She she's gone to the lawyers. She's trying to get a restraining order against you. She's telling them that you're threatening her, that you've been abusive, that I shouldn't be around you because of all this company stuff. My stomach dropped. I could hear the panic in his voice, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. This was her last-ditch effort. She knew she was losing control, and she was pulling out all the stops. She was trying to turn the tables, to paint me as the villain. It was classic Sandy, manipulative, calculating, and utterly ruthless. She's lying, Jacob, I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising inside me. You know that. You know I'd never do anything like that. I know, Dad. But, she's got everything worked out. She's already talked to the lawyers, and they're taking her side. She's got a story ready, and she's making me look like the bad guy. She says I'm being influenced by you, that you're using me to get what you want. She says it's all about the company, that it's messing with my head. Jacob, I said, taking a deep breath. You have to stay strong. Don't let her manipulate you anymore. This is just a tactic to scare us, to get us to back down. She's doing exactly what she's always done, using you and me against each other. I know, but she's got everyone fooled, Dad. She's so convincing. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I felt my heart ache for my son. This wasn't the man I had raised. The boy who had been full of promise, full of potential, was now caught in a web of lies spun by a woman who had no conscience, no moral compass. I had always told him to be strong, to stand up for what was right. But now, I had to show him how to do it, how to push through the fear and the manipulation. You need to trust me, Jacob, I said, my voice firm. You've got the truth on your side. Sandy can't win with lies. If she wants to drag this through the courts, let her. But don't let her use you like this anymore. You're not her puppet. You're a man. And you need to act like one. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought Jacob might back down again. But then I heard him take a deep breath. I'll talk to the lawyers, he said. I'm going to tell them everything. I won't let her do this to me anymore. I won't let her control me. I smiled, relieved. It wasn't over yet, but this was the turning point I had been waiting for. Jacob was finally seeing the light. He was standing up for himself, for his family, for what was right. I just hoped it wouldn't be too late. The following week, the legal battle kicked into high gear. Sandy was relentless, as I knew she would be. She'd filed the restraining order, and her lawyers were pushing hard to paint me as a danger to her and to Jacob. They tried to turn the situation into something ugly, trying to use the company as leverage, making it seem like I was trying to force Jacob into something he didn't want. But I knew that the truth would come out. Jacob and I met with our lawyer, Charles, who had been working tirelessly to gather evidence and build our case. We went over the documents, the forged signatures, and everything else Sandy had done behind our backs. It wasn't going to be easy, but we had a strong case. The truth was on our side, and eventually, that was going to be our saving grace. Jacob had spent hours preparing his testimony, going over every conversation he had with Sandy, every moment of manipulation. I could see the strength in him now, the strength I hadn't seen in so long. He wasn't the boy who had been afraid of his wife's anger anymore. He was the man I had always known he could be. We headed to court, ready to face Sandy one last time. I knew she was going to fight tooth and nail to keep control of everything. But this time, Jacob was standing by my side. This time, he was no longer under her thumb. When we walked into the courtroom, Sandy was already there, sitting with her lawyer, a smug look on her face. She seemed so sure of herself, so confident that she had won. But what she didn't know was that Jacob wasn't the same man he had been when she first started manipulating him. He was stronger now. He had seen the truth, and there was no turning back. The hearing began, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm. I knew we had the evidence, we had the truth, and we had Jacob on our side. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about doing what was right. About standing up to the person who had been trying to tear our family apart. Sandy's lawyers stood up and began their argument, but it was clear from the start that they were grasping at straws. They had no real evidence, no real case. Everything they said was based on lies, on manipulation. When it was Jacob's turn to testify, he stood tall, his voice strong as he told the court everything. He didn't hold back. He spoke about Sandy's manipulation, about the forged signatures, about the way she had tried to control him. The room was silent as he spoke. For the first time in a long time, Jacob was finally speaking the truth. When the judge made his ruling, it was clear. Sandy's claims were dismissed. The restraining order was denied. The company was rightfully mine, and Jacob's. Sandy had lost. But the victory didn't feel like a win. It felt like a relief. A weight had been lifted from all of us. And Jacob? He had finally broken free of the grip Sandy had on him. He had stood up for himself, for the family, for the company. And in the end, that was the victory that mattered most. Weeks later, things began to settle down. Sandy left Jacob, taking what she could, but it was clear that she had lost the war. Jacob was back where he belonged, at the helm of Pierce Manufacturing, by my side. We rebuilt what had been torn apart, but more importantly, we rebuilt our relationship. We were a family again. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. As the months passed, things slowly returned to some semblance of normal. The court battle had been long and drawn out, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Sandy had moved on, taking what little she could, but the damage she'd done to our family was irreparable. Jacob and I had a long road ahead of us, but we were both committed to rebuilding, not just the company, but the trust and bond we had nearly lost. Jacob stepped into his role with a newfound sense of purpose. He wasn't just taking over the company because it was expected of him. He was taking it on because he truly understood its value, not only as a business, but as a legacy. There was a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a clarity in his decisions. The weight of the responsibility he now carried wasn't lost on him, but for the first time, he embraced it. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments of doubt, moments when I could see the old insecurities creeping back in. But those moments were fewer and farther between as he grew into his new role. It was clear that he was starting to see the company not as something I had built, but as something he could build upon, a foundation he could strengthen and grow. And I couldn't have been prouder. As for me, well, I was no longer the man who needed to prove himself. I had spent decades building Pierce Manufacturing, and now it was time for me to take a step back. I wasn't going anywhere, of course. I still worked in the company, but my role was more advisory now. I knew it was time to let Jacob take the reins completely, to let him lead on his own terms. And I was content with that. But the road wasn't always smooth. There were still remnants of Sandy's influence, former employees loyal to her, business partners who had sided with her, whispers behind closed doors. I could tell Jacob noticed it too. There were moments when I saw him hesitate, moments when I saw him questioning the choices he was making. But I knew that was part of the process. He had to learn how to navigate this world on his own, without the safety net of Sandy's manipulation. One afternoon, Jacob and I sat in my office, going over some financial reports. It had become our routine, these quiet moments spent discussing the company, sharing ideas, and working through challenges together. It felt good to know that he was finally standing on his own, making decisions that were right for the company, not just for him. You know, Jacob said, glancing up from the reports, I never really understood what you went through to build this place. Not until now. I used to think it was just about making money, about growing the business. But now, I see it's about something more. It's about the people, the relationships, and the reputation you've built over the years. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. You've got it, son. It's not just about numbers and deals. It's about legacy, what you leave behind. It's about doing something that lasts. Jacob nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment, there was silence between us. The kind of silence that comes when two people are connected not just by blood, but by a shared understanding. How do you do it, Dad? He asked, his voice quieter now. How do you keep going, day after day, building something like this? After everything that's happened, after everything we've been through, how do you still keep pushing forward? I looked at him, taking in the weight of his question. There had been days when I didn't think I could keep going, when I thought I'd lost everything, my family, my legacy, my sense of self. But somehow, I had found a way to keep going. And now, Jacob had found that same strength within himself. It's simple, I said, leaning forward. You keep going because there's always something worth fighting for. You keep going because you've built something worth preserving, something bigger than yourself. And you keep going because, no matter how bad things get, you never stop believing in what you're doing. That's the secret, Jacob. It's never giving up. Jacob met my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the old spark in him, the one I had feared was lost forever. I'm ready, Dad, he said quietly. Ready to lead. Ready to take the next step. I nodded, feeling a swell of pride. I know you are. And I'm proud of you, Jacob. More than you know. As the years passed, I watched my son step into the role of CEO with confidence. He made tough decisions, took calculated risks, and grew the company in ways I had never imagined. Pierce Manufacturing flourished under his leadership, and I couldn't have been prouder. But it wasn't just about the company's growth. It was about Jacob's growth. The man he had become was someone I could respect, someone who had earned his place at the helm. He had done it on his own terms, free from Sandy's influence, free from the doubts that had once clouded his judgment. And as for me, I found peace in knowing that I had done everything I could to prepare him for this moment. I had given him the tools, the lessons, and the wisdom that I had learned over a lifetime of hard work. And now, I could step back and watch him build his own legacy. One evening, as we sat in my office, going over some final details for the year-end reports, Jacob looked at me and smiled. You know, Dad, he said, his voice warm. I don't think I ever thanked you for everything you did, for me, for this company. You taught me everything I know. And now I'm doing it my way. But I never would have gotten here without you. I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a moment, I was speechless. This was it, the culmination of everything I had worked for. The knowledge that, despite everything, the company was in good hands. My son was ready to carry it forward, and I could rest easy knowing that Pierce Manufacturing would continue, not just as a business, but as a legacy. Thanks, Jacob, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're doing great. You've got this. And as we sat there, side by side, I knew that the next chapter of our story was just beginning. It was a story of growth, of redemption, and of family, one that would continue for generations to come. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. After the long legal battle, the intense emotions, and the hard work that went into reclaiming Pierce Manufacturing, there was finally peace. Jacob had settled into his role as CEO, and for the first time in years, I was able to step back. Not just from the company, but from the weight of it all. It wasn't a relief I had expected, though. It was more of a quiet realization that I had done my part. The torch had been passed. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the work was never truly over. The company had grown, yes. Jacob was thriving, and Pierce Manufacturing was more successful than I could have imagined. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the legacy we'd built wasn't just about the company. It was about more than the reports, the profits, and the years spent grinding away in the factory and office. It was about the family behind it all, the ones who would carry it forward. And in that, I realized something I hadn't thought about until now. For the first time in years, I had time. Time for my own reflection. Time to step away and look at the bigger picture, the family picture. It was one evening, about a year after the court case, when Jacob and I were sitting in my office, looking at the final financial reports of the year. It had been a good year for the company, with growth across multiple sectors. Jacob had managed to secure a few lucrative partnerships and expand the business into new markets. I could see the pride in his eyes, the satisfaction in knowing that all the hard work had paid off. But there was something different in him now. Something that spoke of his maturity. It wasn't just the growth of the company anymore, it was the growth of Jacob himself. He had gone from a young man unsure of himself, torn between loyalty to his wife and his family, to a confident leader who knew what he wanted and how to achieve it. "Dad," he said suddenly, looking up from the paperwork. "I've been thinking about something." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's on your mind?" "I think it's time we expand further," he said, his voice steady. "I know you've always focused on the core business, manufacturing. But I've been looking at potential investments in technology, in sustainability. The future of manufacturing is changing, and I think we need to be ahead of the curve. I want to start moving towards renewable energy solutions, to make Pierce Manufacturing not just a leader in the industry, but a leader in responsible business practices." I nodded slowly, impressed by his vision. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about shaping the future, about making a difference. I had always believed that businesses should be more than just profit machines, they should contribute to something greater. But hearing Jacob talk about it, seeing his determination, it made me realize he had learned more from me than I had thought. "That sounds like a good idea, Jacob," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I've always believed in moving with the times. And if anyone can make it happen, it's you." He smiled, a genuine smile that showed his gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. I've been thinking about this for a while. I want to make sure that we're not just building on the past, but shaping the future." I could see it now, the way he was thinking, not just in terms of today, but of what the company could be in the years to come. The fight for the company had been long and difficult, but it had brought out the best in Jacob. And now, as he looked to the future, I knew he was ready for the challenges ahead. It wasn't just about holding on to what we had, it was about growing, evolving, and making a positive impact on the world. That night, after our meeting, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city lights beyond the window. I thought about everything we had been through, about the long hours, the setbacks, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt. But more than that, I thought about the family I had built this for. I thought about Jacob, about the man he had become, and the legacy he would carry forward. And that was when I realized something important. The fight, the hard work, it was never really about the company alone. It was about the bond we had built, the lessons passed down through the generations. It was about ensuring that, no matter what, the values that Pierce Manufacturing represented would live on. That evening, I made a decision. It was time to finally step back fully, not just from the company, but from the anxiety, the uncertainty. I had worked my whole life to make sure the company would survive, would thrive, and now it was time to let go and trust that it would continue. Trust that Jacob would lead it with the same passion, dedication, and integrity that I had always given it. As I sat there in the quiet of my office, I thought about how much had changed. From the early days of building this company with nothing but a dream and a lot of sweat, to the family conflict that nearly tore it all apart, to now, sitting back, watching my son take the reins. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I first started Pierce Manufacturing, but in many ways, it was even better. Jacob would take Pierce Manufacturing to new heights, not just as a business, but as a responsible force in the world. And I would always be there for him, supporting him, guiding him when he needed it. But now, it was his turn. He was ready. As I walked out of my office that night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The weight of the world was no longer on my shoulders. The future was in good hands, and I had done everything I could to make sure it stayed that way. In the months that followed, Jacob moved forward with his vision, and Pierce Manufacturing flourished. He led the company into the renewable energy sector, launching a new line of sustainable products that gained traction in the market. The company was growing, and Jacob's leadership was recognized not only within the industry but in the community as well. He was no longer just the son of the founder, he was a leader in his own right, shaping the future of the company and leaving his own mark on the world. As for me, I spent my days enjoying the quiet of retirement. I still visited the company from time to time, offering advice when Jacob asked for it, but I no longer felt the need to prove myself. The company was in good hands, and Jacob was doing more than I ever could have hoped for. One day, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun set, I received a call from Jacob. I answered, already knowing the excitement in his voice. "Dad," he said, his tone full of energy. "We did it. The new division is launching next month, and it's going to change everything. You were right, this is the future. We're making history, Dad." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "I knew you'd get there, Jacob. You've always had it in you." As I hung up, I looked out at the horizon. I had spent my life working for this moment, not just for the company, but for my family, for the future. And as I watched my son lead the way, I knew that everything we had fought for was worth it. The legacy was secure. The fight for family, for legacy, for what truly matters, it never truly ends. But it does evolve, and as I watched Jacob take the lead, I knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more to come. And I was content knowing that it was in good hands.